Hello everyone, this is Remlays from 40k Theories, and welcome to the March 2020 edition of the Patreon Q&A sessions. As always, if you would like your questions answered, then click the link in the video description below and help support the channel by becoming a patron. Now let's jump into the questions. Warboss Fracas Nasfingers asks, and I apologise for my terrible Orcish accent straight away, "Oi Remlays, you pimply grot, I ask a question. What is Yvraine doing now? Is she meeting with the Twiggy Elder bosses trying to mount an offensive against Appleton's spiky boys?" Yes, that was terrible and I apologise. Last I checked, Yvraine was, she had been meeting with other leaders of the Eldari, like Craft Welders, Harlequins, Drukhari Cabals, etc. If I recall correctly, in Psychic Awakening, she's looking for a Solitaire to join her Inari. And this is what led to Ephrael Stern and the Pariah turning up, because they promised to help her find one. So she's definitely planning something. Martimus Prime 089 asks, with the rumours of a Space Wolf vs Orc box set coming, do you think Ragnar or Grimnar will be made into a Primaris? Well, as it turns out, there is a box set, and as it stands, Ragnar did become a Primaris, so yes. Voice of the Emperor asks, how many gods were/are there in 40k? A lot. You got the 4 main Chaos Gods, you got all the minor Chaos Gods, there's about like 6 or 7 of them at least. You got the 10 Gods of the Eldari, you got Gork and Mork, you got the Emperor, you got the God of the Greater Good that's coming out, there's the Hive Mind if you want to add that. If you really want to count them as well, you got all the Catan, even though they're technically not gods, they're just godlike creatures, as it were. So yeah, quite a few. Why do you think the Emperor didn't just send Angron's Legion to defeat the armies that the Primarch was fighting, instead of teleporting him to the Primarch's flagship? It could have brought the Emperor and Angron closer. It could have, but at the same time, it was just easier. You know, Angron was the only person worth having out of that lot, because the rest were all compromised slaves, with the butcher's nails and all that. It was just easier to go like, this is my son, he's in trouble, yoink, there we go. No point bothering risking the lives of the legionaries, so I can just teleport him away. And also because the Emperor is a little bit of a dick. Ulbrick asks, do Chaos warships use Gellerfields? Yes. In fact, there's even a scene in Deliverance Lost where the Raven Guard do a warp jump right next to a Wordbearer ship, and since the Wordbearer ship didn't activate their Gellerfields, they get swarmed by demons and torn apart. Brother Santodes asks, is it true that Kaldor Drago shows up during the end times of Warhammer Fantasy? It's never explicitly confirmed, but it has been implied to be Drago, though at the same time it's also implied to be the Stormcast Eternal from one of the main AOS novel series. I did a video about this ages ago, and I do need to correct it at some point because there were a few mistakes, so I will touch up again on that in the future. What are the odds that Sigmar is a lost Primarch? Next to none. The Sigmar novels, as far as I'm aware, showed him being born to human parents. Brent Feast asks, what would you say is the craziest theory that you genuinely hope is true? I do genuinely hope that the idea of Leman Russ searching for Isha is actually true, because that would actually be a rather interesting dynamic, all things considered, I think. Have there been any updates to the lore of the Warp Ghosts post-Great Rift? I don't think there have, no. Zero Hits asks, who would you say are your favourite quote-unquote villains of the Warhammer 40k and fantasy settings? Well, in 40k my favourite villains, quote-unquote, Night Lords. Gotta go for my Night Lords. As for fantasy, I'd probably have to go for the Skaven. You know, Skaven are always fun. Ghost Reaper asks, why do Space Marine chapters relegate fully armoured battle brothers to driving their vehicles? Couldn't they get their serfs to do it for them like they do with their ships? It's probably due to the fact that a Space Marine has naturally faster reactions than a typical serf, and so in things like, you know, dropships, tanks, etc., the heightened reflexes are going to be more beneficial in a battlefield situation than the natural reflexes of a serf. In Void Battle, this doesn't actually matter as much because Void Battle is a much slower affair, so, you know, a typical human can cope well as a Space Marine in this regard. That and the fact that if anyone does somehow manage to, you know, board the vehicle, like say they cut a hole through the roof of a Rhino, the driver, you know, can actually fight as well. So it's probably to do with that. Guanaco14878 asks, in Dark Imperium, Guilliman is trying to find information on what happened during the 10,000 years he was away. assuming that he would believe the contents and not question how it was written, which Black Library book would you give him to try and help find answers to help the Imperium? Honestly, probably the War of the Beast series, because that led up to the events of, things like, the beheading. It details the events that led to the disappearance of Vulcan, and because the setting is so much like the modern day Imperium, even though the setting was only 1,000 years removed from the Horus Heresy, I think Guilliman could probably see the closest parallels there, if that makes sense. Mike Murdoch asks, with the Adeptus Mechanicus and the Iron Hand's view of replacing flesh with bionics, how much can they replace and still be considered part of the human race? Is it everything except the brain, or can you go full bionics like some cyborgs in Ghost in the Shell? I think it is everything but the brain. I know in the War of the Beast series, hey, we get to mention this twice in the video, how rare, there is a tech priest who is pretty much just a brain in a jar, so I think that is the limit. Also, I apologise for the fact that someone started mowing their lawn right now and it's very loud, so I apologise. What was the thing that got you into 40k? Was it just seeing the models as a kid, or a video game in the later years that interested you? This is something I have mentioned previously, but basically when I was about 8 or 9 years old, some kid brought in a Citadel Miniatures catalogue and I thought the models looked really cool, but I didn't actually remember what they were from until about 4 or 5 years later when I saw an issue of White Dwarf in a supermarket with my dad. And I recognised the fact that it was Warhammer. Well, I didn't realise it was called Warhammer, but I recognised what it was, and so I asked my dad for a copy of the magazine, and that's basically where it came from. But I got into it from there, basically. Aspertise asks, what do you think the relationship between Guilliman and the Custodians is like, both in front of the public and in private? What do you think they might think of the other party internally, and would the Custodians as a whole, or based on their subdivisions, have preferred a different Primarch? Right, I think their relationship is, on the whole, pretty stable, considering the fact, hey, it's the boss's son, and he's on our side, so I think it's pretty good in that matter. Though I know some of them were reluctant to letting him into the Sanctum Imperialis. I think Guilliman just views them as being, hey, they're the Custodians, they're doing a good job, I'm not going to complain about them because, they're doing their duty. As for if the Custodians wanted a different Primarch, who else would they really want? Because Guilliman is both, he's a general, he's a statesman, he's a diplomat. He's basically everything the Custodians would want for effectively a regent, because he can do pretty much everything. Lion, Lion was a great general, but he was also, socially awkward. He wouldn't have been a good diplomat in that regard compared to Guilliman. Russ, again, do you really want, effectively a wild man in charge of the Imperium? I know I'm shortchanging Russ here when I say that, but, again, compared to Guilliman, he's not going to do the job. Corax is too depressed. Jagatai probably just doesn't give a fuck. He's like, I don't really want to do this, and it's not my job. I'm just going to go and ride. Ciao. I don't know why he says ciao, but yeah, Jagatai Khan now rides a Vespa because he goes, ciao. I'm Italian Jagatai Khan. Bellissimo. I have no idea where that came from, but hey, I'm going to blame all the medication I'm on now. But yeah. Chief Surgeon asks, how is the C'tan known as the Flayer destroyed? Do you know what? I don't think the actual methods detailing his destruction were ever spelled out. I think it's left deliberately ambiguous. As far as I can recall, at least, anyway. The closest we saw in regards to this was in Devourer, where we actually hear the Flayer's last words when the Flayer curse takes over a cryptek, I believe it was. But I don't think we actually saw how the Flayer itself was destroyed. Lucanron asks, how does the warp's time distortion work? Do the traitor marines from the Horus Heresy in the modern day feel like they've been in the warp only centuries, or maybe even just decades? It's literally a case-by-case basis. Some believe it's only been a few weeks, some believe it's only been a few months, a few years, a few centuries. I think there's actually been one documented case where some believe it's only been a few hours. And because, the warp, that's the reason why, because the warp. How big parts of the traitor marine warbands or legions are still from the Horus Heresy and not just replacements acquired later? I don't think that's actually been touched upon either, to be honest. If I had to guess, I'd probably say it's equal parts veterans of the Long War and newly recovered recruits or traitors from more recent chapters. That guy asks, do you think Malcador was one of the only beings that the Emperor trusted? considering that Malcador is regarded as the Emperor's closest confidant, I'd say so. He may have kept some secrets from Malcador, but compared to someone like, say, the Primarchs, Malcador was in on a lot more secrets than any of them. And finally, Brandon A asks, if the Night Haunter was made into a Wraith Lord by the Inari, how would the Night Lords react to meeting their long-lost Gene Father? I think it will be equal parts, holy shit, Night Haunter's back, and what the fuck? Why is he a fucking Wraith Lord? And some people are like, nah, it's not him, nah, it's just some fucking trick in it. Suffice to say, it'll be a mixed reaction. This could lead towards some infighting, but it could also result in some Night Lords flocking to him, like he might be rebuilding his Legion, or Night Haunter, or Wraith Haunter if you prefer, might just fuck off and become like a vigilante. Like he's basically going to be, the Dreadnought equivalent of Batman, just going like, I'm Night Haunter, bitch, shank, and then disappear. I guess. And that concludes this edition of the Patreon Q&A sessions. Again, if you would like your questions answered, then click the link in the video description below and help support the channel by becoming a patron. Until next time, this has been Remlace from 40k Theories, and we'll see you again soon. Bye bye!